Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to talk about the power of professional engineering and explore why a largely unseen and unsung profession increasingly has the power to change all of our lives. If you think about the major issues and challenges facing the whole of society today, they all seem to come back to infrastructure and engineering. And while the headlines may be grabbed by all the pre-election party politics, it is the need to tackle climate change and meet our net zero targets, the cost of energy, the challenge of mobility and public transport that really stand in the way of our future well-being. And the list goes on. The health and well-being implications of water and air pollution, the demand for decent affordable housing, the need to rebuild the nation's biodiversity, all are key issues that simply will not be solved without the input from, and critically, the leadership by professional engineers. Yet, as we see right now, as the general election moves into full swing, when it comes to discussing these big issues facing the UK and the world for that matter, those professional engineers are largely in the shadows, working hard and brimming with the solutions, but nevertheless resigned to taking instruction rather than leading. Well, to discuss whether this is a fair assessment or even whether it matters, my guest today is Sir Jim McDonald, President of the Royal Academy of Engineering, the fellowship organisation dedicated to and focused on championing excellence in all fields of engineering. And as one of the UK's most accomplished engineers, Sir Jim co-chairs Scottish Government's Energy Advisory Board with the First Minister, is chair of the Independent Glasgow Economic Leadership Board and holds senior business appointments with the Weir Group, Scottish Power, the UK Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult and the National Physical Laboratory. So, Sir Jim, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Anthony, great to meet you, and I'm pleased to be speaking to you about engineering and all of that.
Brilliant. Well, let's get straight into it. Am I right, Jim? Have professional engineers been pushed into the shadows when it comes to tackling the issues that count? And if so, does it matter?
Well, engineering and engineers certainly matter, Anthony, so I won't disappoint you with that opening statement. And I don't feel as if we've been pushed into the shadows at all. I mean, that would feel as if we're underappreciated. And I never subscribe to the idea that engineers are banging on the door. The door is being opened these days by government, by investors, by technologists. And it's very clear that everywhere you look, engineers and the effects of engineering are all around us through the designs, infrastructure, investors. And just this week, the National Engineering Policy Centre published a report on how we upgrade wastewater treatment. So that was engineering right on the front foot, covered by national media. And that is making all the difference.
Absolutely. It made it to the Today programme, heaven forbid. Goodness me. Well done on that one.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, the old cliche about an extrovert engineer is an engineer that looks at your shoes when they speak to you. I don't subscribe to that one either. Some of the most articulate, exciting and inspirational individuals that I have the pleasure of working with are engineers and technologists, and you can start to see that percolating through society.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that the Royal Academy for Engineering was there to focus the power of professional engineering across the discipline. Your strapline is "Together we're working to address the challenges of our age." I mean, clearly there are many. I set a few of them out. So how would you describe the challenges of our age when it comes to professional engineering?
Yeah, well, engineers are naturally problem solvers, Anthony, and the world is naturally obsessed with the major grand challenges, climate change, not least of which, of course, resilient infrastructure, the migration of AI into safe applications. But of course, we need to move, and engineers do this, we move from the problem space to the solution space. That's where the opportunity lies. And that's where you inspire people, because the challenges very often distract us, but we need to play in that optimism of solutions and the expertise of the engineering profession to bring those solutions forward.
Well, you also talk about harnessing the power of engineering and technology to build a sustainable society and an inclusive economy that works for everyone. And we'll talk a bit more about your career later, but just to dip into it, you've been deeply engaged in the world of energy transition, away from fossil fuels. In fact, in 2021, you gave a TEDx talk about systems engineering approach to achieving net zero by 2050, which included the use of steam reforming to produce hydrogen or synthetic gas. Now, not everyone in engineering agrees, of course, and some would say that investment should be on wind and solar and tidal, and others say it should be we should accelerate investment in nuclear. But why are we still in such a mess when it comes to deciding what to do, to the extent that we effectively do nothing?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Anthony, and I concur with your frustration. There is no silver bullet when it comes to dealing with climate change and reaching that net zero target that we've committed to legally. So whilst you've pointed out one or two particular solutions, the Royal Academy is probably the strongest proponent of taking that systems approach to finding a solution. So I don't buy into, if you're a supporter of nuclear, it undermines renewable energy. If you're promoting offshore renewable energy, what does that mean for hydrogen? What we need is that systems perspective, understanding the interdependencies, the interactions, so that technology, policy, economics, regulation, and very importantly, society and people's behaviour are integrated. So, of course, it's all of these solutions in an integrated whole. But the key thing we need to do, Anthony, and you've touched on it, is to start moving. Right, so taking a low regrets option of investing and deploying solutions early is what we need to do.
Yeah, and I hear what you say about the fact that engineers are having a stronger voice when it comes to actually working with government. But would you say that the power to actually make that change is really about the ability to get on unnoticed rather than being actually in the headlights?
Yeah, well, Anthony, we can't have it two ways. If engineers are going to profess and excite and inspire, they need to be out there. And it's not about out there simply demanding to be heard. It's showing the value of engineering. It's having the humility and the empathy to recognise the needs of society and those that are investing in us. And I accept your provocation in the kind spirit that's intended. But of course, many engineers, you'll not see what they're doing, but you will see their effects. But we do need advocacy for engineering. And engineers doing that are fine. But very importantly, Anthony, non-engineers, scientists, politicians, investors, they make the case for engineering, perhaps arguably just as powerfully as the engineering profession themselves.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to Devilla Mitchell recently at Arup, and I know she's on a couple of your panels, actually, and she talked about the work that she was doing around meeting our climate change challenges. But when I look at the challenges facing infrastructure, and it's great that people like Devilla are really involved and you're getting these stories into the news. But, there are so few professional engineers who are actually involved in mainstream politics. Is that a problem?
Yeah, well, certainly we need more of them, Anthony. What I will say to you, all of the very strong signals I can hear from government, and in particular the government chief scientific advisor, the new national technology advisor, there is, seems to me, a sincere and authentic commitment to putting engineering and science and technology into the heart of government and decision making. And as well as Devilla, who's a wonderful engineer and a great proponent of engineering making a difference, we do have our policy fellowships where the Academy is supporting government to raise that awareness of systems engineering. And the government themselves and the civil service are now buying into the fact of accelerating that engineering, science and technology understanding. So, of course, I would say it would make a difference, but we've already demonstrated it making a difference through the net zero policy, what we've done around resilient resilient infrastructure and the like. So yes, we need more, and we need to accelerate that because the challenges over the next few decades are going to need that solution-based input to policy making.
Yeah, I mean, you're a fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology, the Institute of Physics, the Energy Institute. I mean, what can the Royal Academy specifically do to ramp that influence that perhaps those other institutions can't?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most powerful interventions we've had in recent years has been the creation and the activities of the National Engineering Policy Centre. It gives us that framework and that collaborative convergence of the 42 engineering organisations across the UK. And we can see that. I mean, each of the professional engineering institutions represent a great body of engineering know-how. But the NEPC and the Royal Academy can help that convening attractiveness, as it were, for almost 500,000 engineers across the UK. So early on in the COVID challenge, We brought together key members of various professional engineering institutions to look at, for example, understanding and dealing with nosocomial spread of the virus. And that meant building design, ventilation, new materials, and that flowed through then into the manufacturing technologies we need for the vaccines. And that could not have been done by one single PEI, professional engineering institution, but the NEPC brought that convening authority, and that's what we're doing more of in net zero, in wastewater management, and some of the bigger challenges that we're looking at as a community.
Let's do a quick spin through some of the vast number of initiatives that the Royal Academy has underway right now. I mean, starting with your flagship award, the annual Queen Elizabeth Prize that rewards and celebrates the engineers responsible for groundbreaking innovation that has been of a global benefit. I mean, it's rapidly become the Nobel Prize for Global Engineering, and it's something which does make the news every year. I mean, why do you think that this has captured the media and the public imagination?
Well, I think because of the level of ambition, Anthony. I mean, you will be aware that when this was established 10 years ago, it was a cross-party initiative. And I have to say, one naturally associates the Nobel Prize with Sweden, and we can understand why that is. What is exciting for me is that the Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering is now, of course, naturally connected to the UK, but it's become an international activity. So in many ways, it, so we say politely, but on an evidence base, demonstrates the UK leadership in engineering. And we've had examples across GPS, biomedical engineering, LEDs, and more recently this year, to my delight, although I wasn't involved in the judging, the power of wind energy and recognising pioneers in that industry, which is going to make such a difference to climate change.
I can't believe you didn't have some influence there.
Anthony, you must believe me, because I'm a man of integrity, and I have to say, I waited with bated breath till the result came out.
Sure, exactly. I mean, of course, the Queen Elizabeth Prize is not the only award scheme. I mean, you've got the McRobert Award, is the UK's longest running and most prestigious national prize for engineering innovation. And you also just launched the 2024 Africa Prize for Engineering Innovation. It's a £50,000 prize, which is now in its 10th anniversary year. Why are these annual award schemes, why are they so important? Is it simply all about just recognising the engineering, or does it really actually help to bring more people into the profession?
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier, Anthony, that engineers like to solve problems, and very often we move on to the next solution. But what we have to do is pause, reflect. What were the impacts of our solutions? What differences did that make to people's lives, to society, to equity? And the McRobert Awards is all about recognising outstanding innovation, tangible social benefit, and proving commercial success. So that pause point gives us, through the Royal Academy and our friends in the McRobert organisations, the chance to highlight, promote, celebrate, and recognise that contribution. And then you mentioned the Africa Prize. I am absolutely inspired by those that we've been supporting. I mean, that back in 2012, the Academy had looked at the Engineers for Africa report and identified a real opportunity where the Academy could have a disproportionate impact by investing in engineering and technological entrepreneurs in Africa. So since then, we've supported almost 150 entrepreneurs in Africa, over 23 countries, and created 28,000 jobs, of which 21,000 are female.
Right.
So what we're seeing is engineering moving the dial through innovation, that notion of commitment to engineering in the service of society. And our friends in Africa came here earlier in the year. The Princess Royal was there to celebrate the awards. And just in a few weeks' time in Nairobi, we'll be celebrating the awards for this latest year. So we've stimulated an absolute army of engineering entrepreneurs.
All around the world, yeah. I mean, you also award grants. You've announced, I think, 17 new Ingenious Awards for public engagement projects designed to inspire the next generation. I mean, that's a program that started in 2007 and offers grants of up to £30,000. I mean, there's lots of different topics there, ranging from agriculture, future sources of water, Formula One, the history of women's involvement of engineering. But compared to the Queen Elizabeth Prize, they're relatively small amounts. I mean, how do they help? Is it all about the seed funding that kind of like starts ideas that actually breeds the eventual prize winners?
Yeah, so this is really about getting the platform for storytelling, Anthony. In any profession, not just engineering, but certainly engineering. You talked about, or I'm making the proposition that the engineers were in the shadows, which of course I've politely refuted. Engineers coming out to tell their stories, to inspire, to share, and quite frankly as well, in that engagement, engagement isn't a one-way process, it's a two-way process. In that engagement, to listen to how people get excited. What do they want to hear? And people want to hear about innovation, exciting technology, but ultimately they want to hear what difference is this making. So these, multiple small grants, they're reasonable sums of money, let's be frank, has already funded more than 330 projects to date. And it's provided pathways for 10,000 engineers to take part in engagement. And that means that we've reached out to over 4 million people around the country. So that storytelling, that multiplication of understanding the value of engineering is really moving the dial.
Okay. I mean, two other initiatives, just to touch on it, that you've announced recently. They're both in Scotland. I'm not sure there's some kind of presidential power play going on there. But anyway, the first is a new enterprise hub launched in Scotland to help engineering entrepreneurs to commercialise deep tech innovations and boost investment. I mean, this, as far as I understand, would champion engineering excellence across Scotland and support local entrepreneurs who are tackling complex environmental, economic and societal challenges. I mean, why now? Why is it so important now?
Well, you shouldn't hear the skirtle of the bagpipes behind me as I answer that question, Anthony. But what you're saying, this is the latest phase of a reach out and a wave of the Royal Academy of Engineering to increase their footprint across the UK. We're proud to have our base in Prince Philip House in London. But in 2020, and I was delighted to be opening the centre in Belfast, we've created a fantastic enterprise hub based in Belfast, but now opening out to act as a bridge between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to create collaboration. We opened in Swansea last year, again, building around education and enterprise. And this recent investment, opening the enterprise hub for Scotland based in Glasgow, that's already building on what's already real activity in Scotland. 35 early stage entrepreneurs having received almost £2 million of investment, and we need to accelerate it. And the point I would make here, Anthony, here is where the Academy can find where it provides the gearing. Scotland is currently about 50% less effective than the rest of the UK in spinning out the wonderful research in Scotland, and the Academy can play in its 10-year sophisticated model to try and make sure that we create new companies and scale-ups based in Scotland. But of course, we're a whole UK entity, and now you're seeing the footprints appearing around the country. Yeah.
Well, the second initiative, and it caught my eye because it demonstrates the range of your public engagement, is the engineering artworks on show at Innovation Late events at the Edinburgh Science Festival. I mean, it's a collection of unique photographs depicting Scottish engineering innovation. Why is this public outreach programme so important, and so important for the Royal Academy to get involved in?
Indeed. Well, of course, in many ways, this resonates with the 55th anniversary of the McRobert Award, and we've talked about their close relationship with those that lead on that foundation. But in many ways, it circles back to what we talked about earlier, Anthony. This is engineers out in the limelight, not in the shadows. And it's about making engineering innovation, engineering technology accessible, and in a way that shows it's the images of engineering, which is really exciting. We can see that in ships and infrastructure, in our mobile phones and the flat screen TVs that we goggle at in the evening. But in many ways, lifting the lid on these engineering inventions is what inspires us. I remember as a youngster going to the Kelvin Grove Museum and Art Gallery, seeing exhibits, cut away inside ships, inside engines. That's what I remember. And these images are the latest generation of inspiring the next generation of engineers.
Yeah. Well, let's dig a bit more into that and talk about you for a moment, Jim. You're a Scot. You're born in Glasgow. You educated in electrical engineering at the University of Strathclyde. You started your career, though, as a graduate apprentice on the Scottish Electrical Training Scheme and worked in the electrical utility sector for 7 years. Is that apprenticeship route still what you would recommend as the best way to get into engineering?
Sure. Well, I would highly recommend that route, but it's not the only route, Anthony. And this is why we say there's no single channel into engineering. My experience as a graduate trainee was exciting for me because it meant during the summer I was in industry, working on substations, working in design offices. As a consequence, when I came back after the summer, what I was learning, I had some context within which to frame the engineering science and theory into what I was doing. So things like degree apprenticeships, graduate apprenticeships here in Scotland, and very importantly, understanding the deep need for many more technician level engineers is going to be a very important driver for the UK to reach its economic opportunity as a science and engineering superpower. But that graduate route worked for me, but young people leaving school, going into universities and into the career, that's fine as well. The big question, Anthony, is we need more of them, and many more of them.
Well, so it's a pretty good way actually for funding that education while you're doing it along the way as well. So, yeah. Well, you returned, of course, to University of Strathclyde in 1984 as a university lecturer in electrical engineering. What was that like, returning as a teacher?
A shock to the system. And when I went back in there, I found some of my old professors that they gave me some of the courses that I'd found some of the most challenging classes in my own right. And I remember doing electromagnetic theory and having lost my entire first summer as a young lecturer, getting the books out again and recovering my steps as a Triple E undergraduate. But what I did find, Anthony, is because of my engineering experience, particularly when I was doing teaching at the latter ends of the course, I could give them so much more practical context. And that fed project work, it fed dissertations. And I don't mind saying, I was delighted to say I was able to point many more young engineers into the utility industry because of my own experience.
Yeah. But of course, your academic career continued and you were appointed Rolls-Royce Chair in Electrical Power Systems in 1993, and you eventually became Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of Strathclyde in March 2009. I mean, how throughout that time did you maintain that touch with the real world? Because, you must, as an academic, grow distant from the real world of utilities, etc.
Yeah, well, I don't accept that thesis, Anthony, and it's back to the point that we discussed earlier. It's about having the confidence and professionalism to actually go out and engage. I mean, my institution, the University of Strathclyde's motto, some 228 years old, is useful learning. And that was inspired by Benjamin Franklin, polymath, and I would like to think the electrical engineer who created the University of Pennsylvania under useful knowledge. So for me, back to what we said, engineers are about solving problems. It's moving from problem space to solution space. But having had that experience in industry, it means my vocabulary can connect to what the requirements are of industry. And more engineering departments do that across the UK. And we have a very fine cohort of engineering capability in our universities in the UK.
Well, you were knighted in 2012 for services to education, recognising all that work you were doing. You were then appointed Knight Grand Cross in the 2024 New Year's Honours list earlier this year for services to engineering, education and energy. And I suppose, firstly, congratulations on that. But second, how do you now leverage that influence or that growing influence that you have?
I think it's about being humble enough but excited enough to engage and have conversations with people outside your profession, Anthony. Very recently I had the privilege of attending a service at St Paul's Cathedral where there were 18 Knights and Dames Grand Cross and 3 of them were Fellows of the Royal Academy of Engineering. Dame Sue Aon, Sir John Parker and myself, John had been an ex-president of the Royal Academy. But whilst I was in that community, I had the pleasure of meeting Ridley Scott, who was directly behind me in procession, and he and I agreed that he was actually an engineer, because he told me for Gladiator he built Rome in 58 days, and he's now coming to visit me later in the year, I trust, to talk about how engineering impacts the movie making. And Bill Beaumont was there, and I got a chance to talk about technology in professional sport. So the general point here, Anthony, is engineering is everywhere, but it's never the same where we find it. But engineering has to be advocated, it has to be shown to be making a difference. And of course, what it needs to do is engage with different parts of the community. So my job, not just as President of the Royal Academy of Engineering, but as an engineer at the senior end of his career, is get out there, do the advocacy, but find those that can take engineering into new applications.
Well, clearly life as Royal Academy President suits you. You seem to be thriving on it. But what do you get up to when you're not being a president? I mean, how do you decompress from all this full-on world of professional engineering?
I have a wonderful wife, very patient. She's a podiatrist, or I would like to say a foot engineer. She and I travel a lot together. We live in the beautiful countryside in Ayrshire, so we spend a lot of time in the fresh air. But I have a great family, 3 children, as I mentioned, all engineers. I have a new grandchild, a new granddaughter.
Oh, congratulations.
And so I play badminton at the weekend with buddies of mine that I used to play the football with. I golf occasionally, and I'm a football supporter. I have a season ticket at the Celtic football ground, a team that I've been visiting since I was 4 years of age. So I've got plenty to fill my time, but getting that balance is very important, Anthony.
Jim, the list of stuff you get up to is exhausting. Your career has been immersed in tackling climate change, and the Royal Academy's got a number of committees and panels working on advice to help policymakers. How confident are you right now that we can decarbonise at pace to hit our global 2050 targets?
Yeah, and it is a challenge, Anthony. And of course, I am concerned because we're not moving at pace or at the level that we should do. That's where the Academy's work through the NEPC is going to be so important. The idea of the missing contingency plans. It's not going to be a straight line to 2050. And for me, we have to have a bigger focus on 2030. The next 5 years or so will really indicate how we can get to the low regret solutions. The deployment and showing hydrogen production at scale. Showing, for example, if I take Scotland, the ScotWind initiative, potentially 25 gigawatts plus of deployment of offshore wind, additional offshore wind. We have to demonstrate we can do this, the electrification of transport. But ultimately, we have to reach or exceed the target for 2050. We must bear in mind that target, but let's not become fixated with it. Every great journey starts with a single step, we are often told. But for me, every great journey starts by knowing where you're trying to get to. And 2030 for me is a big opportunity and challenge. But what we need to do is to get moving. And that's the key here. And a friend of ours and a good friend to the Academy is Lord Nick Stern. And the eponymous Stern report indicated 16 years ago that we need to invest, create industry, create opportunities, and have that inclusive growth strategy. But we're not moving fast enough, Anthony. And whatever happens in terms of the new UK government, they need to get off and out of the traps very quickly, and that's where the Royal Academy can help them with that plan.
Well, we mentioned the work that the National Engineering Policy Centre is doing, and there's there are some, you mentioned there, really, really big and exciting targets on wind, on solar, on nuclear. Would you say though that the energy world is still too dominated by petrochemical thinking? Or are those businesses really vital to the transition?
Yeah, but look, the world is still heavily dependent on the petrochemical underpinning, Anthony, but we're on that journey. The energy transition has the clue in the title. It is a transition, and we can't simply have this binary petrochemicals to entirely low carbon and sustainable technologies. But the petrochemical industry, we need them to be investing. So we need the balance sheet. We need their engineering and technological expertise, and they know how to deploy projects at scale. But of course, they need to continue to demonstrate and have the evidence for their journey in that energy transition. So offshore engineering to offshore wind, carbon capture, utilisation and storage, the hydrogen economy would benefit greatly, not only from the skills and knowledge, but in the authentic commitment by that industry to drive that transition and create new economic opportunity.
So it's ensuring that they act as forces for good rather than the reverse. You just launched a new £150 million Green Future Fellowship Programme to research breakthrough technologies and solutions to net zero. I think that's intended to help researchers develop scalable technologies. It appears transformational. What in your mind could it achieve?
This is such an exciting development, Anthony. One, it's an innovative way in which things have been funded. The government has now found this endowment model where they've also trusted and seen the ability to deliver. The Academy has been doing across a whole range of fellowship programs, the chairs in emerging technology. But this program, over 10 years or more, will allow us to invest de minimis in 50 fantastic people, £3 million on average for a 10-year programme across a whole range of prospective things, and not to be exclusive in any of this, but it would be, for example, generating 24-hour, 365-day-a-year electricity without burning fossil fuels.
Right, yeah.
And we can see the start of that across the UK, looking at the building of electronic memory and data centres that are sustainable in terms of energy use and efficiency, all the way through to waste management, the effective use of materials, and developing as we go into this digital revolution, robotics and automation and AI. So you can see we are, shall we say, very optimistic that 50 is likely to attract even further investment, so we can grow that 50 even more. So that we have this whole army of innovators and technologists, but building economy and economic opportunity as we go.
Yeah. Well, that's all about building this profession fit for the future. I mean, success in engineering is about having the best people and the best solutions. So what's the Academy's role in helping the profession to ensure that they still offer the best careers to the best people?
Yeah, well, it's all about inclusivity and diversity, Anthony. And this is where the Academy, I think, has been really driving forward over the past 4 or 5 years. We have a programme, Fellowship Fit for the Future, because we have 1,700 of the world's best engineers in our fellowship. And over the past few years, we've been seeing that those that we bring in through a very rigorous process into our fellowship are now looking very much more like society. The diversity through gender, ethnicity, the different sectors that they come from, not just electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering at its heart, but digital technologies, bioengineering, AI. So what we are demonstrating now is this is what the engineering profession looks like. And that's a very important way in which to inspire others to join, because all the world's best business schools will tell you, the more diverse and inclusive a workforce, the more innovative they are, the more productive they are more likely they are to come up with sustainable solutions.
Well, I spoke to Chetan Couture of Lang O'Rourke recently on the podcast, and of course he's one of your fellows, and he has had a career in automotive that's now moved into construction. But he spoke about the role and the power of teachers to influence and encourage the best minds into engineering, and I suppose to open doors that kids perhaps didn't know existed. I mean, how do we give teachers the resources and the bandwidth to do that today?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more with Chetan. And very briefly referring to my own experience, Anthony, having been the first in my own family to go to university, it was 2 young teachers, a maths teacher and a physics teacher in my own school, that saw my interest in physics, chemistry, maths, and they channeled me into engineering. And they got to me to make things, because I'd been breaking too many things back at home, and TVs and radios. And Chetan is right. So what we need to do is recruit more STEM teachers, support them with high quality materials, give them the confidence to channel that science teaching and that maths teaching into having them recognise that engineering is a fantastic profession. And that's where these young people, and I have to say, and in respect of this generation, they have more of a social conscience and an awareness around sustainability and climate change than we would ever have done in our generation. So what we need to do is to inspire them. And a very brief anecdote, Anthony, up until I became president of the Academy, I was president of an entity called CESAR. I convened 60 universities across Europe, a whole global group of industry, and we invited a group of students in to speak to this august audience. And they challenged us to make sure we educate them, to give them the skills to tackle the challenges around sustainability that we've left them. So STEM teachers, inspiring, well-educated, and with the resources to get these young people into engineering is the key.
Okay, well, let's hope so. And of course, we have a general election. Just to finish off, how can the Royal Academy help ensure that the right decisions are made by the next government that comes in, whoever that might be?
Yes, we are certainly in a world of political flux and policy dynamism, to use a range of euphemisms, Anthony. But what we've done recently, and you ask an extremely important question, it's to make sure, we're bound to show our political leaders respect, they deserve it. They've been voted in by the electorate. We'd like them to behave as professionally and ethically and as focused a way as possible. So what we've done recently, the National Engineering Policy Centre partners that we've talked about, we're in the process of developing a coherent engineering manifesto. that we're ready to share with all of the parties over the course of the next, few weeks as we go up to the next general election, but certainly it'll be there as a referenceable way which to support policy making. So we need consistency of policy making, we need strong evidence, and we need engineering at the heart of communications, energy, infrastructure. Very important, because ultimately, whoever comes into power later this year, from day one, they need to be out of the starting blocks at pace, because time is not our friend, but there's massive opportunity to build economic opportunity and create social impact as a result.
So finally, I suppose, bearing all that in mind, how confident are you that professional engineers will find that path, will come out of the shadows? Not that they are there at the moment anyway, but how confident are you that they will make the case to invest in infrastructure to ensure the next generation has a world that's fit to live in?
Yeah, so I think the evidence is there. I think the means by which we can articulate the case is key. But if we go back to sustainability, Anthony, for me, there is no more sustainable fuel than optimism. And what we need to do is, of course, identify and highlight the challenges, that is the problem space, but indicate to the political leaders and their civil servants that through engineering, we can give them direct routes to delivering on their manifesto pledges and priorities. That's what we're doing already in a number of projects, and that's what the engineering profession has to do, with a degree of humility, but with the confidence that engineering is a big part of the solution.
So Jim, thanks so much for setting out some really, really sound common sense that I think all the politicians and all the engineers around us should take on board. So thanks for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast.
It's been great to speak to you. Thanks very much, Anthony.
Many, many thanks. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. But we do have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you can find all the background information to the conversation today and the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us, and thanks again to Sir Jim. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.